Megan pulled up to the country club in my Honda Accord, the one I'd bought with 3 years of weekend shifts at the campus library. Champagne paint, 48,000 miles, still had the steering wheel cover I'd chosen. The valet opened her door. She handed him the keys like she'd been doing it her whole life. I paid the Uber driver and tipped 20%. Venmo to Justin Toyota Camry. January 14th, 2023, 6:47 p.m., $34. 50 plus $7. 0 tip. Inside, the engagement party was already in full swing. String lights, past hors d'oeuvres, a signature cocktail named after the happy couple. Mom stood near the gift table, accepting congratulations on behalf of Megan and her fiancé. Dad worked the room with his phone out, snapping pictures for the family album. Nobody asked how I'd arrived. I'd been driving that Accord for 5 years when Megan totaled her Jetta last October. Single car accident? Late night, her fault. Insurance paid out, but not enough for a replacement that met her standards. She needed reliable transportation for her new job. I worked from home. The logic was airtight, according to my parents. They asked for my keys on a Wednesday. By Friday, the title had been transferred. I didn't make a scene. I smiled at the engagement party, hugged my future brother-in-law, toasted my sister's happiness. I looked at the woman wearing my grandmother's pearls, also reallocated years earlier, and I calculated the cost of honesty versus silence. Silence had been my family's currency for as long as I could remember. But then I went home to the apartment I could barely afford without a car payment, and I opened my mail. One envelope, cream stationery, law firm return address, estate matter requiring my immediate attention and signature. I held it up to the light and wondered what else had been transferred without my knowledge. My 10th birthday, Megan, 7, cried because she wanted the art kit I'd been given. By dinner, it was in her room. Mom explained that sharing was love, and I had last year's kit anyway. Birthday card inscription: To our creative girl, love Mom and Dad, May 2008. The card had been in Megan's scrapbook. Mine said happy birthday with $20 inside. College. I'd earned a partial academic scholarship. My parents covered the gap for my first year, then told me sophomore year that Megan's private high school tuition had stretched them too thin. I took out loans. Megan graduated debt-free from that same high school and went to a state school where my parents paid her full ride because they said she wasn't scholarship material and it wouldn't be fair to saddle her with debt. Megan's wedding. They contributed $15,000. When I got engaged 2 years later, they managed 3. The explanation involved property taxes and Dad's reduced hours, but they'd just returned from a river cruise through Europe. My engagement fell apart for unrelated reasons, but I never got the $3,000 back. It had gone to the venue deposit, non-refundable. The down payment. Last year, Megan needed help buying a condo. My parents called to ask if I could contribute to a family investment in her future. I said I was saving for my own place. They suggested I could always live with them if my lease fell through, that Megan's opportunity was time-sensitive. They loaned her $18,000. I got a text saying they were so proud of our homeowner. The car was simply the most recent line item. The pattern had been policy for decades. Every transfer came with reasoning that sounded almost sound if you didn't look at the full ledger. I had kept receipts without meaning to. Memory is its own archive. If the car was given away this easily, what else had been reallocated before I was old enough to notice? The envelope sat on my kitchen counter for 2 days. Cream linen stationery, law firm embossed in navy, Whitmore and Associates, estate planning and trust administration. I didn't recognize the name. I'd never needed an estate attorney. Letterheader, RE, Trust of Eleanor Margaret Whitmore. Deceased, grantor trust review required. Dated January 10th, 2023. My grandmother, Eleanor Gran. She'd died 4 years ago, and I'd received a small check afterward, $5,000, a kindness I hadn't expected. My parents had handled the estate. They said she'd left most of her savings to a scholarship fund and split the remainder between her 2 sons, my father, and my uncle. I'd never questioned it. This letter said otherwise. It explained that the trust had been established for my benefit when I turned 18. Disbursements were to be made annually for education, housing, and general welfare until age 30, at which point the remainder would transfer to me outright. My 30th birthday was in 4 months. The attorney needed me to review the disbursement history, confirm receipt of funds, and sign final documentation to close the trust. I read it 3 times. I'd never received annual disbursements. I'd never even known the trust existed. The fear was immediate and physical. If I signed, I'd be confirming a lie. If I didn't, I'd be accusing my parents of something I couldn't yet name. Either I'd been forgotten in the estate paperwork, or I'd been erased from it deliberately. I wanted to believe in the accident. But the car was still in Megan's driveway. The wedding money was still uneven. The birthday art kit was still in her scrapbook. I opened my laptop and typed the URL included in the letter, the estate portal login. Username, my email. Password, temporary, reset required. I reset it. I logged in. I decided that facts were safer than assumptions. The estate portal was sterile and efficient. White background, black text, navigation bar on the left. Documents, disbursements, correspondence, tax records. I clicked Disbursements. File path visible in browser. Trust, Eleanor, Whitmore, 2018. Disbursements, granddaughter annual. PDF, last modified, April 3, 2019, 11:22 a.m., a table loaded. 6 entries, 1 for each year from my 18th birthday to my 24th. After that, nothing. Each line showed the same structure. Date, amount, recipient, purpose. June 2017, $22,000. Education and living expenses. June 2018, $21,000. Education and living expenses. June 2019, $20,000. Housing and welfare. June 2020, $19,000. Housing and welfare. June 2021, $18,000. General welfare. June 2022, $15,000. General welfare. Total, $115,000. Recipient on every line. Guardian for beneficiary. Richard Whitmore. Richard Whitmore, my father. I read it again. Guardian. I'd been 18 when the first disbursement posted. Legally an adult. I hadn't needed a guardian, and I'd never appointed one. I opened my bank records, searching for deposits that matched the dates. Nothing in June 2017. Nothing in 2018-2019. I went back 7 years. No deposits except my paycheck, my student refunds, the single $5,000 check after Gran's funeral. The trust had paid out $115,000 in my name. My father had received it. I had received 5. I sat very still. The explanations I wanted to construct, errors, delays, some arcane trust structure I didn't understand, dissolved against the simplicity of the table. Money out, none in. If this was real, either my grandmother had never intended the trust for me, or someone had redirected it after she died. Gran used to send me birthday cards with $20 bills inside, every year until she got sick. She'd paid for my first laptop when I started high school. I didn't believe she'd forgotten me. I downloaded every document in the portal. Trust declaration, disbursement authorizations, correspondence, tax filings. 23 PDFs in total. I organized them by date and started reading. The trust declaration was clear. Established 2015, funded with $180,000, beneficiary named as me. Disbursements to begin at age 18 and continue annually until age 30. Trustee, the law firm. No mention of a guardian. Then I opened the authorization form. PDF metadata. Disbursement authorization. Guardian appointment. EF, created, March 18, 2019. Document date, June 4, 2016. I read it twice, then checked the metadata again. The document was dated June 2016. It bore my signature at the bottom, along with a notary seal. The text appointed my father as guardian for all trust disbursements. granting him authority to receive and manage funds on my behalf until age 25. The PDF had been created in March 2019, 3 years after the date on the page, a year after I'd graduated college, 2 months before the portal's last modified timestamp. I had never signed that document. In June 2016, I'd been 19, finishing my freshman year. I didn't remember any trust, any meeting, any notary appointment. I zoomed in on the signature. It looked like mine. The looping capital, the cramped middle letters, but flatter, too consistent. I pulled out my passport and compared. The passport signature had variation in pressure, a slight upward tail on the final letter. The PDF signature was smooth, even. Scanned maybe or traced. I searched my email for any correspondence from the law firm in 2016. Nothing. Forgery wasn't a word I wanted to use, but the metadata didn't lie. Someone had created this document years after it claimed to exist, attached my name, and used it to redirect 6 figures. I sat back and looked at the ceiling. This wasn't favoritism. It wasn't reallocation. It was theft. I called the attorney listed on the letter the next morning and asked for a meeting to discuss discrepancies in the disbursement record. The first call went to voicemail. The attorney, Caroline Whitmore, no relation to Gran despite the name, returned it within an hour. I explained that I'd never received disbursements and never signed a guardian authorization. Her tone shifted from administrative to cautious. She scheduled a meeting for the following week and asked me not to discuss the matter with other parties until we'd reviewed the file. I agreed. I didn't call my parents. 3 days later, I received a second letter. Envelope postmark. Stevens & Moore LLP. Attorneys at law. Subject. Cease and desist. Defamatory claims. Dated January 23, 2023. It accused me of making false statements about my parents' handling of estate funds, threatening their reputation and causing emotional distress. It demanded I retract any allegations, cease contact with the estate attorney, and confirm in writing that all disbursements had been proper. If I failed to comply within 10 business days, they would pursue legal remedies including a claim for damages. I read it in my car, hands shaking. I hadn't made any allegations. I'd asked a question of the estate attorney in private. Someone had told my parents. That evening, the family group chat, usually silent except for birthday reminders and holiday logistics, lit up. My mother's message appeared first. We're heartbroken that you would accuse us of something so horrible after everything we've sacrificed for you. Megan followed. I can't believe you're doing this. They've always put us first. My father didn't text. He called twice. I didn't answer. 2 cousins messaged privately to ask what was going on. I sent them the disbursement table and the PDF metadata screenshot. One responded, "Families are complicated. Maybe there's an explanation." The other didn't reply. By the end of the week, my parents had posted a vague Facebook status about betrayal and the pain of ungrateful children. It didn't name me. It didn't have to. Silence had been their currency. When I broke it, they responded with noise. But I had metadata. I had timestamps. I had a paper trail that didn't require anyone to take my word. Sunlight, I decided, was a better strategy than volume. The mediation office was aggressively neutral. Gray furniture, abstract art, a conference table large enough for 4 people who didn't want to sit close. Caroline Whitmore arrived first, set down a banker's box, and nodded at me. My parents came in with their attorney, a man in his 60s who introduced himself as Alan Morris and did not shake my hand. We sat. Mediator's opening statement binder. Exhibit 12, PDF metadata report. Authorization document, created March 2019, signed June 2016. Caroline slid the exhibit across the table. She didn't editorialize. The metadata was printed in a simple table. File name, creation date, modification date, author property. Alan Morris reviewed it silently. My father looked at my mother. She looked at her hands. The mediator, a woman named Dr. Janice Kwan, asked if anyone disputed the accuracy of the metadata. Alan said, "Metadata can be unreliable." Carolyn placed a second exhibit on the table, a notary journal request she'd submitted to the notary listed on the authorization form. The notary had no record of notarizing my signature in June 2016, or any other time. Third exhibit, my email records, showing no correspondence from the trust or law firm until this year. Fourth exhibit, the trust declaration, highlighting the clause that terminated guardian authority at age 25, 3 years ago. Fifth, bank records showing no deposits matching the disbursement amounts. My parents didn't bring exhibits. They brought explanations. Dad said I'd been young, directionless, that they'd safeguarded the money so I wouldn't waste it. Mom said I'd agreed verbally that the signature must have been a formality I'd forgotten. Caroline asked if they still had the funds. Alan requested a 15-minute recess. When we reconvened, he proposed a settlement, return of $60,000, paid over 3 years, in exchange for a release of all claims and a non-disclosure agreement. I looked at the disbursement table. $15,000 out, $5,000 to me. I counter-proposed full repayment within 90 days. We broke again. The second recess lasted 40 minutes. They settled at $107,000 lump sum, wired within 60 days. No NDA. A single-line acknowledgement of procedural irregularities in trust administration. Nobody apologized. The wire arrived on March 29, 2023. Bank notification. Incoming wire transfer. Ref ID 47291 WHT settle. Amount $107,000. All zeros. Sender, Richard and Laura Whitmore. I stared at the balance for a long time. It was more money than I'd ever had at once. It was also a fraction of what 6 years of compounding growth might have generated if the funds had been invested properly, or if I'd been able to use them when I was 20 and drowning in student loans. But it was real. It was mine, and it had come from the account my parents had been calling their retirement fund. I didn't know the full extent of their finances. I didn't ask. But I knew they'd been planning to retire in 2 years, that they talked about selling the house and buying a condo in Florida, that their lifestyle had always hovered just above their income. $107,000 was apparently the difference between that future and a different one. 2 weeks later, Megan sent a single text. Mom and Dad had to sell the Accord. They're driving the old Corolla now and taking the bus on weekends. I hope you're happy. I didn't respond. I blocked my parents' numbers, muted the family group chat, and unfollowed them on social media. I didn't make an announcement. I simply stopped participating. A friend asked if I felt guilty. I said I felt tired. The money went into a brokerage account. I paid off the last of my student loans. I put a deposit down on a reliable used car, a Mazda with low miles and a clean title in my name only. The rest I invested. I didn't buy forgiveness. I didn't buy reconciliation. I bought a boundary, and I enforced it with documentation and distance. Some costs are unavoidable. Some are worth it. Every January now, I spend an afternoon reviewing documents. Bank statements, tax records, beneficiary designations, credit reports. I check metadata on anything that requires a signature. I keep copies in 3 places: encrypted cloud storage, an external hard drive, and a physical binder labeled by year. Calendar event. Annual document review and audit. Recurring, first Saturday of January. Notes. Check metadata. Verify beneficiaries. Pull credit report. It's not paranoia. It's maintenance. The car is gone. My parents sold it 8 months after the settlement. Part of the downsizing they didn't announce, but that I heard about through cousins. They still live in the old house, smaller now that it's just the 2 of them. Megan calls them every Sunday. I wouldn't know, except she mentioned it once in a group text I hadn't muted yet. I don't miss the calls. I miss the version of my family I thought I had before I looked at the metadata. But I don't regret looking. The trust is closed. The paperwork is notarized and filed. My 30th birthday came and went without ceremony. I took myself to dinner, ordered the expensive wine and toasted Gran, who'd tried to give me something and nearly succeeded. Sometimes people ask if I'll ever reconcile with my parents. I say I've reconciled with the truth, and that's enough. The boundary isn't punishment. It's architecture. I built it where the receipts told me it needed to go, and I maintain it the same way I maintain my financial records, with attention, consistency, and without apology. I don't ride the bus. I drive a car titled in my name. I sleep fine. If you found a document with your signature on it that you'd never signed, would you have opened the portal, or would you have let it close?